Good night. Welcome to another episode of Pursuit. As it is May, we are continuing on with our discussions on mental health and emotions and why it's okay to feel them. That's actually the topic for this week, this episode. We're going to be talking about our emotions. A lot of times, I think we're just going to get straight into it. If you couldn't tell, we're just diving straight in. So we're talking about emotions this week, and I feel like a lot of times we don't really talk about them. You have them. A lot of times you really suppress them because you're supposed to portray this one image of yourself to a lot of people. But when you think about it, it's not really healthy to be suppressing your emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not healthy to hold that part of yourself down. I was reading throughout this week as we were prepping for this, and where did it go? And what did it say? Sorry. It said, unfortunately, many of us have not been taught a biblical or practical way to work through our emotions. Instead, the messages we've been taught through life is to ignore, stifle, and stuff our emotions to keep them tight under control. Now, it's not necessarily that someone has specifically told you, like, hey, suppress those negative emotions. You're not supposed to feel them. But it's kind of something that a lot of times I feel like we pick up throughout life as we grow up in society. A lot of people don't project their negative emotions on purpose. Like, hey, I'm actually feeling really emotional and I'm sad today. That's not a thing that a lot of people. Growing up, that wasn't a thing that a lot of people had said. And so for myself, I know I suppressed a lot of emotions. I just grew up like, hey, you're gonna project this positive, happy-go-lucky girl because that's what you're supposed to do, right? And a lot of times we kind of come up with these elaborate ways to mask our pain, to like distract ourselves from it, or to like not feel certain things. I just reflexed my knee again. But yeah, that's not really healthy. So let's get into it. Did you also, I guess I'll throw it out to you guys. Have you also grown up like, I'm just gonna not show these emotions. I'm just not gonna feel them anymore.
Yeah.
Or maybe not to like that full extent of like, I'm not gonna feel anymore, but
Yeah, I feel like just in general, like my family, they're not really emotional people.
yeah.
So it's kind of weird if I'm like crying or like I have an issue and I want to be there and have a heart to heart. I mean, can it happen? But it would be really awkward because it's just foreign to us.
Yeah. I feel like that's very big amongst like the West Indian community. Like you don't really talk about these things.
Yeah.
So a few weeks ago, and we'll get into this either with this episode or the next episode, I had like a near mental breakdown, right? And it was the funniest thing because as I'm talking to someone, they're like, "Oh yeah, I forgot you have emotions." And I was like, "That's an interesting way to put it." It was a very, very interesting conversation.
I feel like that happens with a lot of people though. Like you forget that you forget that people feel things outside of yourself. Because a lot of times when we are going through things, you're just wrapped up in the fact that I am going through this and I'm feeling these things, that you forget that the people you're telling it about, or like the people you're interacting with also have things going on within them. And I feel like that's like the human reaction to just automatically like think about your selfish, like not selfish, but like what you're going through solely.
Yeah, and I like that you corrected yourself. You said like it's not selfish. It's you feel what you feel 1st,
Mm-hmm.
right? And depending on how strong that feeling is, may kind of determine. I think for some people, it'll determine their capacity to feel for others. Like it's like if your feeling is so strong,
Mm-hmm.
that takes up that whole whatever that capacity you have to feel. It's consumed by your feelings because they're so intense.
So like I'm feeling such strong emotions, I won't be able to empathize with some, or like to visualize what they're going through.
Like, and maybe not. I'm not saying like if you talk to them you don't understand it. I'm saying like in the moment, like in the heat of it, a lot of times I mean, at least for me, like I've like something intense. Like there's an intense situation. I'm not going, oh, I wonder how Asha's feeling about this right now. I'm going, no, I feel so much right now.
Mhm.
For me, just to process what I'm feeling I have to get through that before I can get to what Asha's feeling or to what you're feeling or
Got
anyone
it.
else is feeling. And that's why I said, like, it's not, I don't think it's necessarily selfish. I just think we tend to just mentally, we process our own stuff first.
Yeah, I don't think you can fully encapsulate what someone else is feeling if you're having like a dialogue until you've processed your own. Oh, again, let me preface this by saying we are not psychological professionals. We're not.
Speak for yourself. You don't know me. We've been through this many times.
I know enough. Yeah, we're not professionals, all right? We're not therapists. We're speaking based off of our own experiences and interactions. I know enough.
Do you though?
But yeah, so a lot of times we create like these elaborate systems as to how we're gonna cope or distract ourselves with the pains. A lot of times it'll be like binging a show on Netflix, or like when I remember when lockdown happened, everyone was like, "Oh, I'm gonna bake. I'm gonna watch this show. I'm gonna like do all these things that I didn't get to do before." And I feel like I kind of slipped into that as well, but it was more so of a means. It was more so as a means of me distracting myself from what was happening in my head versus like actually trying to start up a new hobby.
Yeah.
So, sorry, were you gonna say something?
No.
Okay. Was it you distracting yourself from everything happening, or was it you trying to just fill time because you had so much free time on your hands now?
No.
It was the first option. Okay.
Because, well, for me, I like to put things in their boxes. You know, I like to compartmentalize my issues or like whatever it is that I'm dealing with, right? So I put them in their box and I put them away, and I'm like, all right, when I'm ready, I'll come to you. I probably won't come to it, but I say that, you know what I mean? And then when you put all of these issues in their box and you put them away, there's like a lot of empty space left. So instead of dealing with what I have boxed away and put away, I'm just gonna dive into something new.
Okay, so then back to my question then. This was less about COVID and more so it actually was that because of the way you handle stuff, now with COVID and life slows down.
Yeah.
It was either deal with the boxes or binge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so like when lockdown happened, everyone was like, I'm home now. I can't really leave the house. Let me figure out something else to do. And it was kind of a way to mask what it is that you're going through in your head by showing like, hey, I baked this beautiful loaf of bread. I didn't. I don't really think I baked that much. But like, hey, I did this cool thing instead of like actually taking time to work on what it is that I needed to work on. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think I did. See, for me, it was different because, again, you know, I don't necessarily compartmentalize. I just push it down. So I think I'm so used to actually pushing it down. Whether I'm busy or not, I know how to just keep myself distracted from dealing with whatever I've been pushing down. So during COVID, like I ended up working I'd be working to like 3 a.m. right? Because it was just something
to do,
right? And it was, I mean, part of it was stuff that had to be done at the same time, but it was just one of those things. It was like, all right, well, I have the time. It's like I'm not going to sit here and deal with whatever else I'm dealing with, so let's just do this. I don't know if you found yourself doing the same thing, or were you just baking because you like to bake?
I mean, yeah, I do like to bake and cook, but no, like I notice, like when I'm really stressed out, I like get all fidgety, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go take a shower, or I'm gonna go like cook something, and I'm just like during COVID, I was trying to convince myself like you're fine, because like no one else is feeling this emotion, it's just you, you know, because like nobody talks about it. And I remember like I would be like trying to do so many things to distract myself, and then late at night I would just like have all these thoughts that I'm sitting and I'm like, why do you feel this way, why are you sad?
Yeah, because like when you're alone with your thoughts at night, what else are you gonna do at that point?
That's why you need to work till 3 a.m. so that you're too tired to think. See, my system was amazing. Not really, but it was close, because you just work, drop asleep, and wake up and just start working again. I didn't have time
And what we're here to discuss is the
think.
fact that that is not healthy. As I prefaced this conversation with, we're not meant to suppress and stifle our emotions. We're meant to work on them. And then, as I referenced before when I was reading in prep for this, the speaker also kind of went on to say that God kind of gave us emotions as an indicator that there are certain other issues going on within us. So, like, just as you would feel a physical pain and know that you need to take medication or go see a doctor or do some activity modification or something like that, when you are in mental distress or anguish, you kind of need to take the same step back and kind of examine why it is that you're feeling this way. And a lot of times we aren't exactly taught how to do that. But I think a good first step would be kind of just taking a step back at all, kind of trying to see it from someone outside of your perspective. Like, yeah, I'm in distress, but why am I in distress? What kind of triggered this, like, emotion within me? Is it I forgot to do something? Is it I'm like I like because a lot of times with me it's things that I know I should be doing that I just don't do, right? And so I push it off because I think it's going to be this great big task, and then it's just lingering in the back of my head that like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, and it's like I stress myself out about thinking about the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, so that it makes me anxious when I come to actually do the thing. And that's why I try to reframe my thoughts and kind of think outside of myself. Like, why is it that you're feeling anxious about this item? Like, because I'm a worrier, right? I worry, I overthink about a lot of things, but I've had to kind of force myself to again think outside of myself, because yeah, when it comes to a physical ailment, you kind of give that more care because it's going to physically stop you from doing things in the future. But a lot of times with our emotions, we just put the lid on it and move on, and then don't expect it to come back at all.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about just from the Bible was the woman, the Samaritan woman at the well, when Jesus talks to her, because you're talking about this idea that emotions are an indicator of something, right? Whether it's positive or negative, it's an indicator of something. And when I look at that story, I see this woman who is just kind of gone from guy to guy to guy to guy to guy. I think it was 5 guys, right? And to me, anytime I've read that story, I always think she is hurting over something and just trying to not be alone, to like have that comfort from somebody. And I always like how Jesus kind of ends that one. Doesn't necessarily end the conversation, but when he tells her to go to your husband and come back with him, and she's like, oh yeah, this current guy is not even my husband. He's like, yeah, I know, right? It's kind of like she is just so desperate to, I guess, hide or not deal with whatever it is that's going on, that she's gotten to a point where she's not even pretending like, hey, I'm going to marry this guy and da da da. No, we're just going to live together, which, I mean, I know today, I guess that's a little more, it's I don't even know if it's really a taboo at this point, like societal wise, maybe within our community it is, but for her, everything she's doing is taboo, but she would rather just hide and escape whatever emotion. And at least that's the way I've always seen it, right? She's just looking for a way out through this guy, whichever guy it is. And I think we see that play out today also with a lot of people in relationships they're in, right? The relationship is an escape for whatever they're facing.
Oh, yeah. A lot of times.
And I think, and to that, I think Jesus' answer becomes all the more prevalent of, you're searching for something, right? You have this emotional void, whether it's me just pushing it down, you're compartmentalizing, and he's saying, listen, to actually be content, to be satisfied, you need to drink of the living water that only I offer, right? And I think that's one of the things that we need to kind of, I guess, be mindful of when we're dealing with our emotions. It's not just that we have the emotions and God gave us the emotions, but how do we actually deal with it, I think heavily involves our relationship with God.
Yeah. So when I was when I okay, so when I was talking about how our emotions are kind of like an indicator that there are deeper issues, I kind of also wanted to touch on the fact that what is it, that we kind of have to listen to our emotions and kind of try to think about what they're telling us about ourselves, because a lot of the times the way that we react to certain things, it's not for no reason. Like you're wired a certain way, so you will react to things a certain way, but it's up to you to decide if I'm gonna allow this negative reaction to take over me, or if I'm going to, like, cast those cares upon God and like let him show me the correct way that I should be reacting or responding to things. Because I feel like a lot of the times we kind of take it into our own hands, like, oh, this happened to me, so I'm going to do this back to this person if it's something negative. Or if it's something positive, you're like, yeah, I did this for myself. You know what I mean? But a lot of times you have to take into what's the word? Consideration. Your walk with God and the role that he actually does play into your life.
Yeah, I mean, okay. I know you started. I thought you were about to say something. I won't cut you off.
No, you're
So, I think with what you're saying there, it's really important that we kind of draw that line there. And think you started to of it's okay to feel your emotions,
Mhm.
but the reaction or the response based on your emotions may not be okay.
Yep.
Right? Because I think that's one of the things that we kind of, to me, that's where I see a lot of people get tripped up on, especially with what.
No, I just remembered what I was gonna say. A lot of times,
Go for it. Go for
Okay.
it. I'll hopefully remember what I was gonna say.
a lot of times we react instead of thinking about our response. So like reaction is like a gut instinct, like out of like, this is like my gut reaction. This happened to me, so immediately this is my first train of thought. Whereas a response, you kind of stop and think about it, and then you're like, okay, well, this happened to me, but instead of reacting, I'm gonna come up with a constructive response for it.
I feel like you were trying to hit your leg to make it react.
No, it only really happens when I'm like this.
Oh, okay. So I was about to say, like, you're sitting on your leg and you went like you really made a point there. You're like,
Oh.
But I mean, it would have been cool if you actually had done it. I feel like it would have worked. But all right.
It wasn't the point of my
I
statement.
mean, it's a good analogy.
Anyways,
Without thinking about it, you just move. That's exactly what you're saying. But yeah, and I think too that I think I've caught myself so much where I just respond out of, well, react out of the emotion that I'm feeling, right? And I've seen how, I think especially when they are not necessarily negative emotions, because I think we always think like it has to be a negative emotion, it evokes a negative response. I think sometimes a strong emotional, I don't know, like reception to something can cause a negative response.
I'm gonna need you to break that down a little more.
So I can be angry about something, but I don't think anger is negative, right? Because there are things to be angry about, right? If you see injustice happening, right, it's okay to be angry about injustice. And I think during COVID, we saw so much examples of injustice happening on the media. In media.
Sorry, that was. I think there's a difference between passion and anger, though.
Yes, and I'm talking about anger. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm talking about anger, right? I'm not talking about being passionate about something. I'm talking about being moved to anger about something, right? Something so strongly upsets you, right? Right? I don't think it's wrong to be upset. I don't think it's wrong to be angry. I think sometimes when we have that strong emotional, I don't want to say response, but that like reception to something, I think often our first reaction is often to be of equal intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of us mess up. Because, yes, you should be angry about like racism, right? Or, I don't know, whatever injustice you see happening. Yet, right, sometimes our first reaction is not necessarily the appropriate response to a situation, right? And I think that's where, like, for me, when I see stuff on like TikTok or Instagram, especially when it's like people trying to like, I feel like they're not like influencers, they're like gurus that are trying to do like self-help stuff. It's like, yeah, man, if you feel angry, you just gotta go with it. I'm like, no, right? But then at the same time, there are people who then take that and then you end up like me, where it's like you're just suppressing it, which is not. It's like we, for some reason, our society either hits one extreme or the other. We don't actually deal with it often in a healthy way, or it's not portrayed to be dealt with in a healthy way.
Yeah, I feel like society plays a big role in like suppressing emotion, because you don't want to be that girl they're like, oh, she cries too much or she's too complicated. Like, I've heard that so many times, and it's like, when you hear that, you're obviously not going to ever want to show emotion around that person, or like, it's just in your brain. You're just like, oh, well, I don't want to be that person, so I'm just going to act tough. And then I feel like you'll, as you said, suppress it, and then you'll forget that you had that emotion. And then like I've seen many times with myself, like I'll just all of a sudden like just be overwhelmed, and it'll just come out, and I'm like, whoa, I forgot that I felt that way about that issue.
So like I mentioned before, I like to put things in their boxes and I put them away, right? But I was talking to someone that like mentors me, and he asked me the question. He was like, so what do you do if all of the boxes fall down? Because like when you're piling things up, if it gets too tall, it'll just fall. And then I was like, that's where you're asking the wrong person the question. Because that's like, I feel like that's something we all have to work through. Like a lot of times we suppress our emotions and expect them to never come back. And then we suppress and we push and we pack and we and then they all just come back with a vengeance, because like with, it's physics or whatever. Like when you it's like with every action, there's a reaction. Yeah, an equally an opposite reaction. So the more you push something down, the harder it's fighting to come back up. You know what I mean? And so, and it's in that time when that wave has hit you that you kind of you're kind of forced to process your emotions. And it's happened to me a few times where all of these boxes just fall, like they just, they just collapse in on you when you have to like, now you're forced to try to unpack these mass emotions that if you had just dealt with them in the time that you felt them, you would never be in the situation.
Question.
Yes.
Have you ever, and this goes to both of you, right? Well, for you, it's the box, but have you ever tried to deal with the box, but dealt with it the wrong way, and then like it still became a problem later on?
Yes. Well, I feel like anytime you deal with something the wrong way, it's going to come back to you. You know what I mean? So like, I can deal with something and I know that I should have like dealt with it a better way, or if I should have listened to what God was telling me, or the person that I'm consulting about the situation, I should have listened to them, and I still went and I reacted instead of responding. And it definitely comes back to you. But then in that moment, you're like, oh, I should just listen to them. I wouldn't have liked it in the moment, because obviously it's the harder thing, but it's harder in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, it works out better for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, depending on how hard it is of a box.
Like a little shoe box or like a jewelry box, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's different boxes.
I know that I'll find myself like, sometimes I'm like, okay, you got to do this now, and then I'll try, and then it'll just be too hard, and I'll be like, I'm just gonna stuff it back in. And
I think one of my problems is self-awareness, because I'm aware of the fact that I should not be putting these things into boxes and packing them away. But what do I do with my awareness? You know what I mean? Like I know I shouldn't do this,
So then just deal with the boxes.
but that's harder. That's why I put them in the box. I put them away so I don't have to. And and I think that's where your relationship with God comes into play. Because I am aware of the issues that I have, and I'm aware of the fact that I don't like feeling this way. But what I'm not aware of is how to solve the problem that I have. And if I don't know, like, if I'm not good at articulating my issue to someone, like a friend around me, like physically here, who else am I going to talk to? But God, who knows me inside and out, who knows all of my problems before I can even think of how I'm going to explain it. Like, there's like literally no one else in the universe that would be able to decipher my thoughts better than God.
Yeah, and one of the things, the reason I asked that question was, I think we often try to find ways to justify not dealing with the box, right? Whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. We always find ways, even though, as you said, we often know dealing with this now will be so much better mm-hmm. for us in the long run. Yet, the fear of, I think, that momentary increase in pain or whatever it is, often scares us to just, hey, I'm not going to deal with it, right? And I mean, I'm not trying to use you as the only example. I mean, for me, it's just push all of it down until, a volcano erupts or whatever, right? And the reason I brought that up was because, like, I feel like I've had situations in my life where I've tried to deal with it in, like, the least amount of effort possible. So, and it took me really until this year to realize, because I wasn't actually dealing with it, it's like I was talking about it, but it's like, I kept the box at the top. So everyone, it's there, it's like, it's kind of being dealt with, it's not being buried, it's at the top. But I never actually really, like, opened the box and really dealt with what's in the contents of that box. So now, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of stuff happened, and then I had to have, like, a 5-hour conversation with someone about the contents of this box, right? Which, just led to a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, in the end, it worked out that, like, we talked it through. And I was just thinking, had we had this conversation, like, years ago, mm-hmm. we both would have been better off for it. Mm-hmm. But I think, I'm not going to speak for my friend, but at least for me, I didn't want to deal with it. I just thought, hey, the box is there. We both know it's there. If we don't touch the box, neither one of us deals with it. The problem, like, the box would just, like, dissolve on its own and go away. And I think experience just kind of tells you over and over again, that's not what happens. Mm-hmm. More often than not, that's not what's going to happen. Whatever you're trying to bury does not just dissolve, right? Yeah. It kind of just festers and grows.
I like that we always use nasty terms like festering and growing when we talk about stuff like this, because it is such a negative, like, it's not a good thing that needs to be happening.
This kind of ties in, but, like, have you guys ever, like, watched a movie or a show and, like, something really, like, sad or dramatic is happening and then you just start, like, crying? Or
do you ever, yes, and then do you ever, when that happens, right, and you're already sad, you listen to sad music to make yourself sadder? Yeah. Oh.
The worst part is when it's not a sad movie, right? Like, that's happened to me. It's like, it's not even a sad movie, and it's just like, why am I so emotional about this? Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me?
That's how you know you're like, the boxes are about to come down.
And it's worse because then if you're not alone too, it's like, oh, hey guys, just gotta run to the bathroom real quick.
Dude, this is not good, but I've gotten so good at like stopping it. I've gotten so good at stopping the tears before they come out. It's really not good. I shouldn't be laughing about this, but But yeah, that's how you know the box is about to fall.
Yeah.
That's how you know. But so we've talked about the boxes,
Mhm.
when everything falls down. But how do we actually process it? I think. Hold on, sorry, it zoomed in really, really big for some reason. So how do we process these emotions healthily? What are your takes before I give mine?
Jessica?
So one of the things I think that has to happen is you have to repair the foundation, right? So, and whether it's your box example or mine just pushing it down, I think what often happens is the immediate response is, hey, I just got to start somewhere. I'll just take whatever box is on top and I'll start dealing with it and I'll just work my way down, right? For me, I think that we really need to start from the bottom up. I think we need to deal with the foundation first because you can be healthily dealing with the box on top, but then the ground underneath you is about to crack, right? Same thing if you're pushing it down, right? If you're pushing stuff down, you're just jamming all of that weight onto your foundation. At some point, the foundation is going to reach its limit. It's going to crack. So in my head, it's we have to deal with the foundation. For me, the foundation is your heart, right? You have to deal with that first, right? Because if you're not dealing with what's in there first, what's to stop you when you have that box that you're dealing with from dealing with it any better than you would have, right? If there's no transformation in your heart, more than likely you're just going to do the same thing over and over again. And that's what I saw happen with what was with the thing I was saying before about my friend and I, right? There was no transformation here. So when I would deal with the issue, I dealt with it the exact same way every single time. And then I was just wondering, why are we still like here? Why does this stay a problem for us? Right? I've dealt with it, right? And the way I dealt with it, the the reasoning was solid. It wasn't like I was saying something wrong or incoherent. No, what I was saying made sense, but it's just the way in which I approached it was so bad, and I just kept approaching it that way. And it took, for me, a lot of things to change in me first, so that when I went back now to deal with it, I could actually deal with it in a much better way. And I think on both sides, we were able to do it in a better way. So I think we have to change our heart. And I think you see that in Luke chapter 8, where he talks about the parable of the sower and the seed falling on different types of ground, right? The ground being your heart, right? If you keep trying to deal with stuff, but you don't have the right type of heart for it, it's always gonna just end up bad. And I think for a lot of us, we have to really focus in on, okay, transform my heart first, God, and then let's deal with some of these things. Asha, your turn.
I think that we have to allow, like, give ourselves grace during that time, because I feel like if we, like, it's so easy for our reaction to be like, nobody else feels this way but me. So once you realize that you're not in this alone, then you can kind of like take the next steps. And for me, I guess like a healthy way of dealing with it from my perspective is I have to recognize the emotion first, and then I have to, like, if I can't like speak about it to someone, I'm writing it down or I'm talking to God about it. Like, that's just the way that I'm gonna realize that I have things to work on.
Yeah. So I think what I was going to say is kind of a mix of both of your answers. So before you can change anything, you need to recognize the fact that there is a change that needs to be made, right? Because I can say, like, yeah, I know I have these faults, but what am I doing about it? Am I actively trying to fix it, or am I just saying like, yeah, I know I have this problem, right? And then once you realize that you do have these things that need to be changed, it's then putting a name to it. So like, yeah, I have all of these emotions, but let me actually take the time out to say like, yeah, I'm anxious. I'm feeling really depressed about this one issue, or this one thing is just, it's making me angry all the time and I don't know why. I think once you put a name to an emotion and once you try to figure out what it is that you're feeling, only then can you really give it over to God. Because if you don't know what you're like, if you don't put a name to it, right? If it's not like, this is my distress, it doesn't have to be like, I'm feeling anxious about this because of this, this, and this. It's just, I'm feeling anxious about this. And once you can put a name to it, I feel like then you can give it over to God. Because if you don't know what it is, if you don't know that you have a problem, you won't know that you need a solution. Right?
And I think that's what you see happen back at the story with the woman with at the well, right? Jesus pulled all of that out of her, identified all of these things she was doing, right? Until he kind of starts getting to the issue at hand, right? And, even as Asha was talking, I was thinking it really should be a combination of both. I think that has to happen, probably like concurrently, right? You have to be working on the foundation while probably working on the issues at hand. But I do think that, as you were saying, just identifying what the issue is, right? And it's such a rudimentary skill that like you're taught in school, right? Like you can't solve a problem if you know what the problem is. Yet so often when it comes to our own personal health or our own personal mental and emotional health, we don't try to identify the problem. We just try to suffocate the problem, right? Yet it's one of the most basic things. Just identify what the problem is. And like you're saying, you're not looking for the full necessarily chain of events that led you to feeling this way, right? And it's not to say that knowing that doesn't help. I'm saying, or rather,
you don't
were
need
saying,
it to start.
Right. You don't need it to give it to God, right? And it's interesting because I was thinking, just as we were talking, like all the miracles that happen, right? You often don't hear them saying like how they ended up in this position. Like you don't hear like this guy is blind because of this, and this. You'll hear other people talk about it, and then you often then see Jesus like ignore the reason and bring healing, right? And it's not to say those aren't important. I just think Jesus is more focused on the issue at hand and how do we resolve it, I think. And hopefully in resolving that issue, it deals with the chain of events. I feel like you're about to say something.
I was waiting for you to finish.
Go ahead.
Okay. Going back to when you were talking about the woman at the well, I feel like a lot of times, because she knew that she wasn't living like a typically outstanding life. She knew that she was an outsider because of her choices that she's made. But I think a lot of the times, and I can't really speak for her because I don't really, I don't know what was going through her head, but I think what I kind of got from it is she didn't feel worthy of getting help. She didn't feel like she deserved to be a person that brought herself out of her situation. She kind of just was like, well, this is my reality now. I know it's not the greatest, but I'm just going to suffer through it because of my choices and because I don't deserve any better. And I think that was also why Jesus at the well was kind of such a shock to her, because she didn't like she's going to the well in the heat of the sun to get water. She's going there purposely so that she doesn't encounter anyone else, because first of all, they're gonna mock and ridicule her, and no one wants that. But second of all, because she doesn't feel worthy enough to go at like a more reasonable time. So the fact that he was there purely just for her, it kind of shows that like God will meet you where you're at. Like he will step into the sun and wait at the well for you. Like you don't need to come when the sun is down and like it's still cool out when everyone else is getting water. You can he'll be there in the thick of it with you. And he kind of, when he does meet you there, it kind of allows you to lean into the emotion. It allows you to be like, yeah, I am allowed to feel these things. And it's okay that I feel these things because I know that God is guiding my path and he's guiding my footsteps through this. He will show me how to respond versus react. And I think that's kind of where a lot of times we overlook the situation because not that we forget, but it's not as blatant that like when you have a negative emotion, like you can talk to someone about it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there's a better way I could have said it.
I'm not gonna lie. When you said God was in the thick of it with you,
the backyardigans.
That's the only thing going through my head. I'm just in my head, just on repeat, into the thick of it. I'm so sorry. That's the only thing.
That was a really good moment that I
had. I feel bad. I really do.
You could have suppressed that one.
No, we said we're not doing that.
Is this a coping mechanism?
I don't know. It might be. I unlocked a new coping mechanism.
But anyway, when God does meet you in the thick of it, right? You can kind of apply the truth.
She went back to say it again.
What do you want me to say? When God does meet you where you are.
Yes, there we go.
In the thick of it. When he meets you where you are, right? He kind of shows you how to apply his word and his love into your situations, right? Because the root of all of these issues is going to be either a fear and insecurity, a lie that you think about yourself or you've been told about yourself. It's going to be a negative emotion. And as we've been told time and time again, from childhood to eternity, God is love, right? And you can never get a negative feeling about yourself from someone that is just purely loving you for who you are because he has created you to be the way that you are. And then I feel like once you kind of apply God's truth and God's wisdom into your situations, it's definitely way easier said than done. But once you kind of do learn how to do that, you can kind of express your emotions more healthily. Like you'll definitely learn how to cope with these things versus just boxing it up or suppressing it or like having an explosion of emotions down the line.
Thoughts?
I agree. That was very well said.
That was kind of all I had for this episode. So if anyone else wants to wrap it up, then you can go ahead.
I still have the thing playing in my head.
I knew that's why he was laughing.
And there was something else I wanted to say too. Any final thoughts, closing thoughts? Because I'm just going to keep laughing about this thing in my head now.
I guess to Ariel's point, just realize that you are worthy and that, God is going to be with you. He already knows how you feel. He needs you to realize that emotion and come to him. He can't help you if you don't want to help yourself. So.
And then I feel like sometimes even if you aren't necessarily comfortable with talking to someone, once you are able to bring it to God, he kind of opens doors for you to be able to talk to other people around you. Mm-hmm. So I remember last year I was just very anxious about certain things, and at the same time, it was last summer, I believe, and I was able to talk to a friend that I had that it was a superficial friendship, I would say, for the most part. We're really friendly, we talk about things, but you don't really get deep. Mm-hmm. And it was only until I had brought my problems to God that I realized that it's okay for you to talk about these things. Yeah. And he kind of put her into this position where I felt comfortable talking to her about these things. And you realize you're not alone in your anxiety. You're not alone in like the fact that you fear the future or whatever it is. Because I know a lot of times for people our age, like you fear the future, you don't know what's going to come. And that was kind of where I found a lot of my insecurities and my anxieties. And so I was able to talk them through with her. And even then, it's like you can talk to your friends all you want, right? And you can have really good conversations and really good growth from that. But it doesn't, sometimes you need more than that, right? Like you need like sometimes you need counseling, sometimes you need someone that's more qualified. And that's also okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it can be someone in your church, it can be like a therapist, or like as long as they fall within like your beliefs, like your religious beliefs. Because a lot of times you can find a therapist, they can tell you things, but it doesn't really align with the word. You know what I mean? So I think if you are going to find a licensed professional, make sure that they are falling within the lines of the word. Because if you're trying to build that relationship, and if you're trying to cope within, like, you know, God and your relationship with him.
I agree. All right. I think that's been a good place to stop. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. For everyone that doesn't know, we do have a Pursuit Live service that is coming back after not really having a service for, I don't know, the whole
COVID.
COVID. So that's going to be happening this month. So, well, starting this month, it's going to be the third Friday of every month. So, and as of right now, it will not be live streamed. So I encourage you, if you are in the New York City area, to come on out. It is for junior high / middle school students, high school students, college students. I was looking at you for confirmation and you looked away. That was wow. Wow. Young adults. So, you know, it is focused for young people. So we encourage you to come on out here at our church, Faith Assembly. We're in Richmond Hill, Queens, New York, in case you didn't know. So yeah, we encourage you to check us out for that. And if you aren't already following us on social media, Facebook and Instagram, if you do, you will see more updates about that. I believe they've already been rolled out, but you will begin to see more and more as we get closer to that date. Yeah. So, and we will be back here again next week to talk about some more emotion stuff. I feel like that's
emotion stuff.
Emotion stuff. That's gonna be the name of the series, Emotion Stuff. All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
Night or morning. Oh, why do I say that every time?